I don't understand, lets him make really, really good creatures. And I wish I could do that. So, and when we think about what's in his head, what he actually can do in his head as a computer programmer is he knows how to make stuff. He knows how to make creatures, how to make art that is good. It's in here. It's not in here, not in the computer. And so early on in SPORE's development, I was sitting down with John and I was looking at a bunch of the creatures that he could just draw, and I was trying to figure out with him, like, what are the patterns that these things have in common? So clearly he has in his head these like rules and constraints, some ideas about how to make good-looking creatures. And I want to take those things out of his head and put them in the computer program so that anyone can do that, right? Like make these constraints into toys. So we were looking at the creatures and looking at their body shapes, actually. He was pointing out to me that there's actually a pattern to the bodies of those creatures. And if you look carefully, you can see that all of the bodies of the creatures have this sort of like beanbag-like shape to them, right? That's kind of like squished around, right? Like this guy down here is like, this is like a weird beanbag, and he's kind of like a circle body, he's got this other kind of beanbag body. They all kind of have this like globby body like shape. And so you know, that is one of the rules and constraints to use, this beanbag shape thing. And he sat down and we talked about it, he came up with this diagram showing me, he said, this is what's going on in my head. This is kind of like how I'm thinking about designing these creature body shapes. And so I took his sort of understanding of it, his illustrations of it, and I built this sort of toy that sort of represented those constraints. And if you look at this shape, there's like 3 handles that you can sort of size and move around. And with this toy, you can make any beanbag shape that you want. So anyone can take this toy and make cool beanbag creature body shapes with it, even though they don't know anything about how to make cool creatures. So this represents John's knowledge of what makes a good creature body in software form that anyone can use. And then I did the project in 3D, and we found that it was limited in certain ways, and then we ended up putting in this vertebrate controls, which is maps nicely to the fiction, right? Like most creatures are vertebrates, right? And then like this became the UI for them, like doing it. So it became very natural for the players too, because it sort of suggests how you work with it. And we put it in the game, it became what's you actually see now. So okay, so I'll talk a little about UI design. So one of the interesting things about player creativity when we make things is that people don't know what they want. You know, this is sort of funny. It's like, like when a genie asks someone what are your 3 wishes, you really have to think about that, right? And if you really think about like if you're going to design something or create something, people don't know what they want, but people do know what they like and they don't like, which is really interesting. Like you can say like that's bad and that's good, but I mean you can say what you want. It's easier to order off the menu than to like think of what you're going to make for dinner. So one of the big design challenges in SPORE was sort of the 3D editing of the creature editor. So this illustration, which is showing up just terribly on here, is of the sort of like a front. Could it possibly turn off the lights for just a moment so you can see this better? So this is like the front. You're looking down the front of the creature. This is what you're seeing. This is the body and the 2 legs. So if you're moving, so this represents the foot of the creature. When you drag the foot of the creature, it's on the ground. So it's sort of implicitly constrained by the semantics of what's going on. Its feet stay on the ground, right? So when you drag it, you sort of move it in the plane of the ground. So we know what you want because we know you want the foot on the ground. That makes sense. You don't want the foot like in the air, probably. And one of the challenges we had is that the computer screen and the computer mouse are 2D, right? 2-dimensional. But the creature is actually a 3-dimensional thing. And when you grab with your mouse, so this represents, we're looking at the creature from the side, which is like, this is the screen, I'm sitting here, this is my mouse, and my mouse is pointing at an infinite number of points along this line, right? And I'm saying I'm grabbing this knee of the creature and I want to move it around. The question is, when the player drags that, where do they want that to go? They want there, or maybe there, or like maybe any of those points. We just don't know that, and that's one of the hard parts of doing 3D with the 2D input device. And but what we figured out is that going back, people know what they do, even if they don't know what they want. People know what they don't like and what they like. And we found that there's a lot of constraints we can use to figure out where they probably want it. And we probably don't want it down here, because it doesn't make any sense to take this knee of this creature and put it over here. That's doing something like this. It doesn't make any sense, right? Like that. And they probably don't want it towards the screen too much either. Hopefully we want somewhere in between. And what we found is that it doesn't really matter. Some people don't actually know where exactly they want it in 3D space. We can pretty much put it anywhere in the area in between, and like people will think it's okay. They just don't really care, which is kind of amazing. It's like, we don't know what you want exactly, but since you don't know what you want either exactly, like it's okay. Like that's just like that sort of blows my mind. That works. So I've learned the hardest design problems with the future editor. They have all the secrets for free. So there's a bunch of I'm just going to fast forward here. There's a bunch of really cool like user interface stuff that's like standard that people know about. I'm just going to share a few wacky things with we thought about the future. And one of it is like this ultimate simplicity. We wanted this to be like a one mouse button, entirely mouse-driven user interface. And the aesthetic, and because we also put advanced features into the game, we have this aesthetic of make it as simple as possible up front. So when you first walk onto it, it's just like one big shiny button you just push on. It's like looks simple, doesn't look overwhelming. But then as you get to know it a little bit more, it sort of like opens up, and then there's like more features hiding inside of it. Right? And then as you get to know those features, they kind of like open up, and then there's like even more stuff you can do inside of that. So we really wanted this sort of like really graceful sort of like reveal of features and complexity in the editor. So that way a beginner could go ahead and do everything you need to do, but an advanced player could sort of spend more time and sort of get more intimate and get more control. And one heuristic we used to think about whether or not we should make something a beginner or advanced feature was, first of all, is it necessary for beginners, right? If it's not necessary for beginners, we should probably hide it and just wait till later to introduce it so we don't scare anyone off. And if it could actually potentially confuse any beginners, we also want to sort of hide it and save it for later. And then finally, if it's a feature that an artist asks for, we definitely would hide it for later because artists tend to want more advanced features. And we definitely started with sort of one mouse button sort of design rule. And if you look at a lot of sort of software that people commonly use, like Google and the internet and mail, it's all like one mouse button stuff. We wanted to stick to those conventions. We definitely didn't. Then there's like UI that has crazy number of buttons and features, and we definitely didn't want to do that. I'm going to fast forward through it. Okay, we're going to keep on structure preserving transformations. Okay, so in the building editor, you make buildings and you can stack things up with blocks. You put blocks on top of each other, and that's how you make stuff, right? And there's this interesting question of if the player has made a building like this, right? This is 3 blocks, and they drag that bottom block over to the right a little bit. What do you expect is going to happen? What do they expect is going to happen? So is it A, that just that block moves over and the other 2 blocks stay where they are? Or is it B, that the whole thing moves together, right? And the answer is B, because that just makes more sense for whatever reason. And the reason is that we sort of have these sort of semantic understanding of what's going on. We perceive some structure in that first illustration that those blocks are standing on top of each other. And what we found is that we want to sort of find as many of those deep structures as possible and preserve them across the user's operations. So we want to preserve the structure that's there as much as possible while doing what the user wants. And this is sort of like an abstract design philosophy that we use over and over again across all the editors and found to be very useful. Another feature we found, and when I first came to work on SPORE, I didn't believe this, but Will Wright was really adamant about ensuring that there was always symmetry in the creature editor. And the reason for this is that just about every biological thing that we experience has symmetry inside of it. We all have bilateral symmetry. You look at a flower has lots of symmetry. It turns out that just like people that are more perfectly symmetrical are more beautiful. This is what psychologists found to be statistically true. It's really interesting. So just having the symmetry in the creature editor, just like, it's incredible how much better the output looks. Just incredible. And another important sort of design philosophy we had was reversibility. That anything you do, any action you do, the reverse action should do the reverse thing. So in the SPORE's feature editor, when you drag a block off to the side into the world to work with it, that's how you create it. And to destroy it, you just grab it and throw it away off to the side, and it goes away. And people just figure as soon as they drag something in, they then drag it out, and it totally makes sense. So it's you're sort of setting up these promises and fulfilling them. And making sure that things are always reversible was really, 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 really nice.